Welcome to Pure Hustle Podcast. I'm Mike.
And this is Orlando, and we're on episode 414, another update episode.
That's right, 414 episodes in, and this is our Wednesday update episode. Every other Wednesday we have an episode. One Wednesday is an update. The next Wednesday is a themed episode, and our update episodes are one of our absolute favorite because it's our opportunity to talk about what's going on in our life reselling wise, what's going on in the reselling community, and to give those spicy bolos, those things that you should be on the lookout for when you're at garage sales, estate sales, thrift stores, all the places that you're sourcing, so that you can be flipping all the different items, those treasures, those hidden gems, and making that cash. And so this is one of our update episodes. Orlando, how's it going, man?
You know, I got to tell you, it's going well. It's been a minute since I've been able to say something like that. I think it's on two sides of it that the reason why things are going well. On the one end, it's Q3, and I believe people are buying now for the holiday, and so sales on eBay are picking up a little bit. And then on the other side, I've actually had a chance to be consistent again. I got to tell you, this summer was one of the busiest summers I've had. I can't believe we're talking about the end of the summer, right? Summer is gone, and I'm really sad about it. It was the last summer with both of my kids being in the house. One of them is off to college now, and it was one of the busiest months. I would say August was crazy. I wasn't able to do a lot of reselling stuff in the beginning. Probably for about 3 weeks, my business kind of was on autopilot, and you could tell by the numbers. And so June and July were slow because, you know, a lot of people say summer slow down. I think it's just because I slow down. And, you know, I did have that huge hit in April where I was told by eBay that I should have a flat promoted listing rate, and that killed my business. And I ended up having to get off of that and go back to my uncapped dynamic ad rate. And so I think eBay has finally caught up. Like, I think it took some time to recover. So I would say if you ever make any drastic, crazy changes like I did, it's probably going to be a good 3 months till you see things rebound again. And things have rebounded. It's been good. You know, the sales have been consistent. They're not at where they were before the whole debacle, but they're a lot better. I would say I'm at about 80% of where I was, which is far better. In the grand scheme of things, it's still not as great as it was, you know, back in 2022 and before. But, you know, I think this Q4, things are going to go well. And so I encourage everyone, if you have a bunch of inventory you haven't listed, make sure you listed it. Yeah. Make sure you list it. Two different words.
That's right. Real quick, let me interrupt you real quick here.
Yeah.
You said, you know, you're starting to see some rebound, and you're trying to compare it to a couple years ago. And we've talked probably, you know, we've beaten the dead horse as far as
I know.
downturn of the economy and stuff. But I do have a question. So I know that when you very first went full-time reselling, man, it was like you were grinding like crazy reselling. Mm-hmm. And you also got a lot more other side hustles and things going on now. Would you say you're putting in the same amount of time and energy and effort and consistency, because you use that word, with reselling now as you were back in 2019, 2020?
I would say more. And I know that's going to sound strange, but you have to remember when we started the podcast, you know, social media and reselling kind of became one and the same. But I would say when we first started the podcast, it was probably 60, 70 social media and then 30 reselling, right? So, you know, everybody always catches what you do on Instagram stories. Everybody catches your posts, you know, our YouTube videos. I mean, I was spending a lot of time doing that. I was spending a lot of time reselling, but it wasn't anywhere to how much I'm spending now. Like back then, I've said it before, I could devote 20 hours to reselling, and this is, I would say, not after 2020. This is pre-2020, so I would say probably like 2016 to about the end of 2019, a little bit into 2020, before things really took off. I didn't spend a ton and it allowed me to, you know, help us build the podcast, help build our following on social media. Because remember, we were dropping 2 episodes a week at one time, right? We even had the book study that we were actually reading books. I was posting on social media 3 to 5 times on the feed. I was basically posting full YouTube videos on social media every night. I remember one of the guys that worked at eBay, Doug, would say, I look forward to the end of the night catching your YouTube video on Instagram. And it was like that for about 3-4 years And so it may have looked like I was devoting a ton of time to reselling, but I would say it was more on the social media side to help us build a podcast, get more people to know about us. Now I spend far more time on reselling, but the results aren't the same. They're not the same. And so I wish I could say, yes, the reason that things are the way they are is because I haven't devoted as much, but I don't believe that's true. Now, there could be maybe a 10% difference, possibly, but I'm looking at, how much I source. I source way more now, but I would say I source in less time. Where back then I was going sourcing every day. Part of that was because I wanted to share, finds on social media. Where now I source twice a week, right? I might have a private pick or two, and then I go garage selling, and that's pretty much it. Now, I will say, I went to the thrift store this past week, and I got to tell you, thrift stores are packed. Whether it be the Goodwills, the store that shall not be named, whether it be the Salvation Army, and that one store that we really like, they extended their hours to later hours, right? They're open even more because they're so packed. There's so much business. And it's one of the things we said way back in the day when we were finding news articles from the recession of 2008 that thrift stores become super popular, and so does e-commerce. So maybe we're at that cusp, right, where things are going to rebound. Hopefully it doesn't mean we're at the cusp of a recession, which I think we've already been in one, but that's for another discussion. But I think things are going to start rebounding here pretty soon, whether it be because of Q4 or whether, things will kind of, start doing well in 2025. So that's been good. The other thing is, I want to share this story real quick. Be careful at estate sales. And I say this just because it happened to me once. This is the first time in probably a decade. I've probably only had this happen 2 or 3 times. Early morning, I went to an estate sale. And it was like the only thing happening. It was Labor Day weekend. Labor Day weekend is usually a terrible weekend to go to estate sales, go to garage sales. And I show up to this one. And the reason I showed up was because there was this shark tooth San Diego Chargers hat. If you know anything about the old vintage hats that are shark tooth, they kind of have that curved tooth on it. They go for good money. We're talking about like $200, $300 hats. And so I saw one of them on one of the ads for this estate sale. So I showed up. I was going to show up like first thing at 7 a.m. and put my name in. And then I was like, you know what? I don't want to battle people. Like that's my G.I. Joe and all that. Like I don't want to do that stuff anymore. If you guys know from older episodes where I used to run after stuff and I used to get into it with people, like that's just not me anymore, just because I know there's so much opportunity that it's not worth the fight. And so I was like, all right, I'll show up. Well, I show up and I go into the room with all the hats, and this guy has literally hoarded all the hats. Like, there's probably like 60 hats, and he just put them all around him. Now, my question to you, Mike, I'm not asking whether it's ethical. I think there isn't an ethics issue here. My question to you is: would it be the right? Not the right. It's not the right word. Would it be the proper thing to do if I saw that hat in there and I just took it and walked away? Would that have been okay?
Okay, so you got to describe the scene for me. You're saying he's hoarding them. What do you mean? Is he already like scooped them into a pile?
Yeah, they're all in a pile in front of him. Like a pile, like It's so big it's around him, right? And he's going through each side of the pile, combing through them, and he's looking for all these hats. And I see the hat, but he hasn't gotten to it yet. So there's a part of me that wanted to jump in there and just take it and walk out. But then,
see, I think it kind of depends, right? Because there's a lot of times you're at an estate sale or a garage sale, and like let's say there's a small table with books and somebody's looking through the books. If it just looks like they're scanning books trying to find a book that they want, I'll come up next to them and I'll start looking at books too, of that same pile of books or whatever, hats, whatever it is. But if it's like clear that like they have like now basically purchased these and they're just kind of trying to see what they have, I think those are two separate things. You kind of have to read the room and see like, is this like, hey, they're just kind of hoarding this section to look for items, or have they kind of said, I'm buying these items and let's kind of see, what should I offer them price wise? I think there's a little bit of a difference.
Yeah. I think they just grabbed all the hats because they didn't want anybody else to find that hat. And so he just grabbed all of them and was looking through them, and he found them. And I was like, oh, good for you. You're going to turn $200 into $200 to $300. And that was fine. But that's not the worst part of the estate sale. That was the beginning. So then I go into a room, and this is one of the bolos I'll share later on. I find a whole bunch of vintage mouses for computers, corded mouses. Some of the optical mouses, the trackball mouses, they do really well. Some keyboard, all this stuff. So I just start putting stuff in a box. And then at the end, I go to the front desk, and I give them the box. And I didn't do my due diligence. Like, usually I'll go in and I'll go, okay, I don't usually try to add everything, itemize everything. I kind of give a rough estimate. Okay, this is what I'm willing to pay. I don't know what was going on. I don't know if I was lazy. I don't know if I was tired. I don't know what was happening, but I was just like, hey, just let me know, and then maybe we could work out a deal. And they're like, yeah, we could work out a deal. You got a lot of stuff. So they work out everything, and I get quoted $225. And I was like, oh, $225. Wow, I didn't think I picked up that much. I said, can we do $150? So I don't even go back. I just countered at $150, and they're like, I don't know, $150. And the lady next to me, who was also running the estate sale, goes, I want to do right by the family. Can you do $175? And I was like, you know what? This company actually has given me good deals in the past. So fine, I'll do $175. So I get it, and I go home. I think you know where this is going. And then I start itemizing everything, right, in my trunk as I'm getting ready to do the Instagram story. And everything adds up to about $145. And I'm like...
Now, what? $145 of what you'd be willing to spend, or $145 of what you're going to be able to make?
No, based on each of the price tags.
Oh, I see.
Do you get what I'm saying? So right. I want to assume the best of this person. So my guess is they probably saw a price tag on one of the mouses that said $5, and they probably guessed all of them were $5 a piece, and that's how they came to $225. I don't, unless they were very nefarious and they just lied to me and just upcharged me, which I don't think that was the case. But I'm also a believer that there are evil people out there, but I don't think this.
Oh, come on! Yeah, even if they did upcharge, I mean, I don't know if I'd put that in the category of evil, because I mean, think about it. It's like reverse negotiating. Like they were able to get a higher price out of you than their tagged price. Which if you go to a store and they overcharge.
Negotiating?
Well, yeah, because if you go there and basically, let's say all of the tags added up to $200 and you offered $150, you're not evil for trying to get it for less than they're asking, and they're not evil for asking more than you're willing to pay, right? So but I see what you're saying as far as like, did they know that if they were to itemize it instead of trying to bulk deal it, they would have gotten less from you? I highly doubt that, because if you didn't do that math, I doubt they did that math either.
Yeah, it was. I don't think that was I don't think they were trying to be deceitful. I think it was just laziness. I blame myself for it. That's why I was so upset about it, because I should have done my due diligence. Because if I could have just right there in front of them just counted everything, it wouldn't have taken much. I kind of was just, I guess I trusted too much.
It's like that kind of reminds me of I mean, it's a little different. I need to make some clips of it, but there was a Bluey episode, which if you haven't seen Bluey, man, that show is hilarious.
No, I have not.
There's this Bluey episode where the two little dogs, and one of them is like dressed up as like an old grandma dog. What? And they were at a garage sale, and the grandma at the garage sale refused to negotiate. Like, people would ask for how much, and they would offer her really low, and she would just take it, and she felt bad, and people were like, that's worth more than that, you need to charge more. And so anyways, the side skit is this little girl dressed as a grandma gets in a like hardcore negotiating battle with another actual grandma dog that's trying to buy a wheelchair, like an electric wheelchair, and the kid keeps raising the price. So the first lady is like, I'll pay you $50, and the kid's like $500, and then the grandma is like, oh, I'll give you $100, $600. The kid keeps just going, every time a number, it kept going higher, and finally it got to the point where it was like well over $1,000. And had they taken that first $500, it would have been like the deal, but it just keeps going up. Like, every time you offer me lower, I'm gonna go up in price. It was pretty hilarious.
Well, that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. They just upped you in price.
They did, and I wasn't. The thing is, I wasn't upset with them. I was upset with myself, in the sense that I believe this can happen to anybody. I mean, I've been reselling for over a decade, and this has only happened to me, I want to say just twice. I remember one time I grabbed a bunch of speakers. I didn't look at the speakers, and they were just trash, and ended up overpaying like by $100. But here's the beauty in all of it, is that when you're buying secondary goods and you negotiate and you're making good profit, the reality is you hardly will ever take a loss, right? Because even though I would say everything was at about $145, I probably would have negotiated to $100 or maybe $125. So let's say worst case scenario, I lost $50, right? I paid $175. They would have if let's say it was 140, I would have said 100. They would have said 125. So I lost $50, right, in the end. But again, I didn't lose it, but that's what I potentially would have lost had everything gone well. I'm going to make $400 to $600 net on everything I purchased, right? So it's still not a loss. But it's just, I want to, when you're bundling out there, make sure that you itemize before you bundle. But there are some times where you just bundle and you kind of read the room and you realize there's a lot of resellers coming. You realize that, sometimes I always tell people, don't negotiate in front of others if possible, because what happens is the person that you're trying to negotiate with, they may feel that, hey, if I give this person a good deal, everybody else is going to ask for a good deal, and they may not cut you that deal, right? The other part is I've had resellers go, like, they'll say something on the side like, oh, man, yeah, that's a steal. Or they'll go like, oh, that thing's worth so much more, and just to kill your deal, because there are people like that out there that do exist. And so you just got to read the room on this one. Hey, my fault. I should have itemized items. I'm not too mad about it, but just a warning for people out there. So
nice.
How about you?
Yeah, so this last weekend was Labor Day weekend, and originally my plan was I didn't want to do garage sales. The last time I went to garage sales, it was kind of like a wild goose chase. It was a better weekend I could have, but I also wanted to spend some family time. So there's this area near us that it's like it's a heritage, homestead heritage. So it's a religious based like community living place where they do like old school, they do really cool things. They do field trips and stuff where kids can go out and check it out, but they'll like hand mill stuff. They like have glass blowing. They actually have blacksmiths there. Like, so they have like actual craftsmen, people who are part of their community, and they do all the things by hand. But I've been seeing a lot, cause I've gone out to a couple of their festival things, cause they have some cool like festivals they'll do. But I've been seeing a lot that they've recently started I guess the best way to describe it is like a craft fair. And it was advertised as like, lots of people are coming and setting up booths there. So I wanted to see if this was going to be kind of almost like a flea market, because obviously I live in Waco. And so in the Waco area, you've got, Chip and Joanna Gaines with the whole, Fixer Upper show. And she's known for going to like flea markets and things and buying like vintage.
You always crank me up. I'm sorry. You always mention like, oh, Waco's known for Chip and Joanna Gaines. I'm like, that's not what I remember about Waco. But
yeah,
anyways.
but now that's definitely what it is now. I mean, obviously there's still the
those of you from the 90s know what I'm talking about.
Everybody will remember, the Waco situation, but yeah, as far as now, people coming to Waco, I mean, they're coming because of the silos and Chip and Joanna Gaines. So, anyways, like I saw somebody that I know, like friends with, they had posted that they went the week before to the flea market thing, the craft fair, and they actually saw them there. And I know that she goes to a lot of like flea market type stuff around the state and buys stuff for the houses that she does and does for HGTV. So in my mind, I'm thinking this might be, more like an antique type flea market place where I could potentially pick up some stuff. Plus they have tons of cool things there, like kind of almost like a pumpkin patch. Like if you've ever been to like a pumpkin patch, there's several out there in San Diego. I'm sure all of our listeners have pumpkin patches in the area where they've got tons of things for kids to do. They got petting zoos and horse rides and pony rides. And so I was like, I can go to this with my wife. The kids can play, they could do some fun stuff. And then I could check out this flea market. Well, it turns out it was mostly just members of their community, and they do some really cool handcrafted stuff, but there's just not the margin to be able to sell the things, to flip the things. I'm talking like they're like legitimate leather workers and like people who are like hand making things or quilts and stuff like that. So you're not going to be able to pick something up at a price that you're going to be able to flip it for. Now, if you wanted something for yourself that was high quality, handmade, you could definitely go there and pick it up. So it ended up being a bust for that, but it was still cool to be able to take the kids and go do that. But I didn't want to just go home empty-handed. So we stopped at Crazy Hot Deals, and Saturday is not the day. Yeah. I mean, it's an okay day, but it's not nearly as good as Friday is. And then I also went again on Monday. It's Labor Day, and it's $4 day on that day. So I was like, I just want to check it out. Maybe they got some better stuff. And I was able to pick up a handful of, not a handful, like a lot, but like 2 of these Bluetooth auxiliary plugins for cars. Now, what I mean by this is a lot of the newest cars, a few years ago, they started making it where your phone could Bluetooth to the car. And not just music-wise, but your apps would show up. So your map would be Bluetooth on. You could change your Pandora, all the stuff on the screen. But that's actually relatively recent. Before that, you could plug your phone in through a USB port and then plug it into your phone, and then all of the apps and stuff would show up on the screen. Well, they've recently come out with, and you can get them on Amazon, they're like a small little Bluetooth chip that you plug into the car, and then your phone Bluetooths to that, so you're actually still wireless, but then you get all the apps. So it's almost like you have that newer feature of the newer cars. But these aren't cheap. Like if you go on Amazon, you're picking them up new, the cheapest models are still going for like $60. And so picking these up for $4 is pretty good deal because the resale value on them is relatively high. I should be able to, sell these for $40 a piece. So we're looking at like $80 profit on those, plus a handful of other little things here and there, $20, $30 profit. So did okay with that. Went to the bins, picked up a little bit of clothes. It's not my favorite thing to pick up, but the hard goods section was just not doing super well for me that day. Plus I had the kids, and so you can only keep them busy so long in a thrift store, especially when you don't want them touching stuff. So the bins was okay, and then we went home and just enjoyed the weekend, but still probably have at least a couple $100 worth of profit off of maybe an hour worth of looking. So I'm not going to complain at all about that, and I still got a good fun weekend. And now I know going forward that Homestead Heritage, that their flea market is really more of a craft show than a flea market. And so that's off the table for sourcing. And sometimes you just don't know until you go, right? Like sometimes you just have to try places to figure it out.
No, you just never know. I mean, I've come across things where I'm like, I'm never going to go there. And then I go and I'm like, wow, I wish I had gone here before. It's kind of how I feel about the swap meet out here. I haven't been to the swap meet in probably 8 years. And at least a big one. There's a big Kobe swap meet here in San Diego. And maybe it's worth me going because when I went 8 years ago, I didn't have the same knowledge that I have now. So maybe there are deals out there. So you just never know. It's the best is when you go somewhere where there's not a lot of people and you just try to source as much as you can until you find out that other people recognize what's there. So now the question is, if you found a lot of good stuff, would you have shared on the podcast? That's my question, Mike.
No, especially if I found like a source. Now I might have said that I found a connection for beekeeping equipment, handmade beekeeping equipment, right? Because people they're not going to know where to go. They're not going to have the same resource that I have here. But yeah, no, I didn't get that. But yeah, if I found out like, hey, this is just a good like cheap antique thrift type place, I'd probably talk about it more generically. And sometimes I do, right? Like one of the things I picked up this last week, a component to a gaming system. So it's not a gaming system itself. It's not like a controller. It's like something else that goes with, but I don't want to talk about it because it's not super well known. I don't see a lot of people flipping them, and they show up, and it's not like I get them all the time. Like it's maybe like 2 or 3 a year that I'm able to pick up. But when I get them, I tend to be able to sell them for and make $150 profit on each one. Nice. Somewhere between 125 to 170, just depending on how condition and model and all of that. But it's one of those things like, yes, there are certain things that I'll speak about more generically. And so, yeah, and I recommend that for anybody. Like if you've got the honey hole, right, the place where you're getting all your stuff, you might share that I've got a place I'm going to, but you're not going to say the GPS coordinates are,
Yeah, looking for these items. No, I get it. All right, hey, everyone. So as we are in Q3 and approaching Q4, one of the things you don't want to have to stress about is your bookkeeping. And the tool that I've consistently used over the last, I don't know how long, ever since GoDaddy Bookkeeping went away, has been My Reseller Genie. It is a bookkeeping software created by resellers for resellers, and they're always updating what they're doing. It's a great tool, and it allows you to import everything from eBay and Poshmark, allows you to keep track of your profit and loss, your inventory. And so if you haven't yet checked out My Reseller Genie, you should do so. Go to the link below and use our code Pure Hustle, all in caps. You'll get 15% off the first month. Again, that's Pure Hustle, all in caps. Get 15% off the first month. And it's definitely going to help you, because last thing you want is to be spending all of January stressed out about everything that you sold, everything that you picked up. Instead, you can already have that information ready to go because of My Reseller Genie. Obviously, you'll have to do some tweaking here and there, but it's a lot better than not having anything at all. So check out My Reseller Genie, and it's a great tool. All right, random stories. So I got to tell you, I want to see if you remember this. Remember eBay Open 2019? Remember CEO Devin Wenig? Right. What was one of the things that he introduced that eBay was going to be doing? Do you remember? There was a few, but there's some that didn't pan out.
I mean, I don't know if it was him. It was another guy who was talking about having more of like almost envision like a MySpace version of eBay.
Okay, there was that.
There was like the stores. Obviously, we talk about the. Well, no, immediate payment wasn't being promised in the same way then. They told us no for that. There was more of like the store version where like a buy it again option.
Okay,
items,
right? But that was tied in. Do you remember what they wanted to do? It was very similar. Amazon,
they wanted to have like a warehouse. Yeah, they wanted like almost like an eBay warehouse where, if you want to get your toilet paper, you're going to go to eBay and then there's the buy it again feature and then those items will be stored in an eBay warehouse and then they're shipping to customers from there. And the point that he made then that I thought was a good point, but I figured they were using it wrong was just imagine if all of the boxes being shipped by eBay had eBay logos on them and they're coming from like, it's going to help the eBay brand. And it's like, well, you could just give us free boxes. But yeah, that was part of it is they were talking about how many items are sold on eBay. And if those were coming from an eBay warehouse already shipped in eBay boxes, then people would see eBay on every porch in the same way that they see Amazon Prime boxes.
Yeah. So those of you that are new to the podcast or new to reselling, this probably hasn't been talked about since 2019, right? It was called managed delivery, right? It was going to be eBay's competitor to Amazon, right? Where it was going to be, they're going to have fulfillment centers. And actually, I remember like they even had mentioned how they were going to do it, all the logistics, like it was going to go. And then it just died. Like somebody, somehow it killed it and then they got a new CEO. The funny thing is the new CEO, Jamie Iannone, is the guy who made Walmart the competitor to Amazon. Right? If you guys had listened to our early episodes, there was a time when Walmart was losing $1 billion a year trying to compete as if they were Amazon. So they were trying to do fulfillment centers. They're trying to do the buy it again. They're trying to do the fast delivery and all those options. And actually, they are a competitor now. And we'll talk about that later. But Walmart Plus is very similar to Amazon. They don't have as many items and they can't ship as fast on some things. But I will say, if you're in an urban area like a metropolitan region, you're able to get all these items really fast. And so it worked out for them. But the interesting thing is this was CEO Devin Wenig's idea. The CEO who had helped Walmart become this came over to eBay, and then it just never happened. And the reason I thought about this was, when those of you that listen, whenever your child goes to college, you buy a ton of stuff, right? There's just all these things that you never thought about. Like they need a laundry hamper, or they need a power strip, or they need a refrigerator, or they need books, or they need like all these things, right? And where do people go to buy these things? Mike, where do you think people go to buy these things?
Depends on where they're at, but Walmart or Target, typically.
But if you don't want to drive and you want to go looking for things, where do you go?
Amazon.
You go to Amazon, right? And I would argue that Amazon, the prices there are just as good as Walmart and Target, right? And if you have an Amazon Prime membership, it's worth it because all the time that you save by not having to go out there. Now, if you have Walmart Plus, you might do Walmart Plus. But I bought so much in this last month from Amazon, right? I looked at eBay and stuff was more expensive on eBay than it was on Amazon. And the worst part about buying on eBay was the shipping times. Like on Amazon, I could get stuff overnight. I could get stuff same day. I could get stuff at the latest in 2 days. Or on eBay, it's like, oh, you'll buy it Monday. It might arrive by Friday or Saturday. And it's like, no, that's way too long. Like, I don't want to wait that long. And I was thinking to myself, like, what if eBay actually did manage delivery? What if they took this on in 2019? Where would they be now? Like, was it a missed opportunity? I just was thinking about that. And on top of that, I was thinking about the idea of how easy it is on Amazon. And a lot of people get upset. I get upset about it because, when Q4 comes, I get crazy returns on Amazon. But I understand it because what returns causes the consumer to do is go, you know what? Yeah, I may get it for like a couple bucks less if I buy it from Target or I buy it at Walmart. But you know what? Amazon, like, it's easy. Like, for example, I I bought a shirt, right? And the shirt was great. It was awesome. But it was one of those shirts that you iron it. It was like a dressier shirt. You iron it, and then within an hour or two, it's like you never ironed it. And I'm like, What is this? And guess what? I could return it, and I could return it without having to get a label, without having to get a shipping package. All I have to do is go to Amazon, say I'd like to return this, and they're like, hey, drop it off to the UPS store or Staples, and we'll take care of everything. You don't have to bring a label. You don't have to bring shipping. You have to do anything. And I was like, how easy is that, right? So what did I do? I returned it, and I just bought another one. And I want to encourage people that, yes, we're not Amazon. Like, returns hit you a lot harder if you're a secondary seller. But what it does is it grows consumer confidence, right? People are more likely to want to buy from you knowing that if anything goes south, that they could return it. And it's going to be hassle-free. They're not going to have to beg you. They're not going to have to open a case against you. They're not going to have to do anything. They can just go click return label. And I encourage people to do that. I encourage people to do free returns. And I know that always gets controversial, but I will tell you, my business has not been negatively impacted by returns ever since I opened it. Even free returns, I only got burned one time. I sold a heater that weighed like 70 pounds, and I had free returns, and it killed me. I think I lost like $100 in the whole ordeal. So I'll never do free returns on that heater, right? But it was a reminder to me again of e-commerce selling has to be easy. And if you're selling on eBay and you're making, buyers jump through all these hoops, you're making them, first you're saying no returns. Okay, that's a big hoop. They have to go open a case, do an eBay money back guarantee. Or then you offer returns, but then, you give the buyer a hard time about it, right? Or you get it back and everything's fine with it, but you're kind of like, you're disgruntled about it, and you're like, you know what? I'm gonna make sure that I only refund them 50%, right? Now there are cases that you do have to refund only 50%. For example, I have a baseball bat I just sold. Bat was fine. Don't know what happened when they're at practice, but they broke the bat and they're shipping it back to me. Guess what? I'm gonna refund them 50% on the broken bat. Like, the bat was just fine. I have no idea to know what happened. But I want to encourage people, like, returns, to me, there's only an upside. And this is why on Amazon, I just kept buying on Amazon, because I'm like, hey, if this doesn't work out, we could just return it. Not a big deal. It's not going to be a big hassle. And sure enough, I would say let's say I bought 30 items on Amazon, only like 3 of them were returned. Right, and it worked out to Amazon's benefit. So that is just my my random story about my experience with Amazon.
Nice. So I don't have a super great random story this time around, but it's interesting because the reason we met in the first place is you were my vice principal and one of the administrators of the school that I was at. Dean, I don't know what the technical title you had there was, but so I found out about reselling. I did a little bit of dabbled in reselling before I met you, but really dived into reselling because it was something you were doing on the side, and then you ended up moving full time. And we've talked a lot about how reselling is one of those things that has definitely moved up in the eyes of culture and society. It's not as stigmatized. It's kind of a normal thing. And we actually live in a time where like side hustles are almost necessary, right? Like you kind of, for a lot of people, even if you, this isn't the world that our parents lived in, right? Like a single income, normal career job oftentimes isn't enough just to make ends meet. And so a lot of people who have, quote unquote, respectable jobs in career fields end up moving into and doing a little bit of reselling too. And I was just listening to somebody talking the other day at work, and it was a coworker, and I'm a teacher. I work in the teaching field, and this person is pretty high up in this district. And just by hearing their conversations, I kind of picked up that I think they do a little bit of reselling. And so it kind of jumped myself into the conversation. I just asserted myself in there and started talking about it a little bit. And then, mentioned I did the podcast. But it's just one of those things that's almost a shock. Like I remember, years ago, like hearing, with various things. I remember, this sounds really bad, but I remember, when I was in California and they were trying to push like the legalization of marijuana, and that was like really big on a lot of the tickets. One of the things you'd hear a lot of people say is so many people you wouldn't even expect. Like there's a stigma of who is using this item, but honestly, there's lots of people, like there are lawyers and doctors and this, and they start naming off all of these people in, respectable fields. And I almost feel like in some ways that same argument can be applied to reselling, where it's like there are a lot of people that you wouldn't even expect. Like you see somebody and they might be wearing a suit and tie. They might go to a law office, or they might work, managing something. And then you come to find out like, oh yeah, I also sell things on eBay on the side. And so it's just kind of shocking in some ways, but also it's a good thing to see. I guess it's both good and bad. Like it's a good thing to see that people see what we do as more of a legitimate thing. But then the bad side of that is it's kind of sad that so many people have to rely on a side income in order to make ends meet, which again is why I'm so grateful for reselling, is because it's one of those ones that you can do. And it's actually, I feel like, more sustainable, more profitable, and has potential to make like a full-time career, as opposed to, I'm just going to do a little bit of Uber Eats on the side, or I'm going to donate plasma. It's like, those things might help you pay the bill here and there, but it's not going to be a potential avenue to change your life forever, which goes back to, was it our Monday episode or was it our themed episode last time? We had a recent episode where we talked about that, like how reselling can change your life for the good.
Themed episode, yep. No, it's funny you bring that up. I mentioned to you the story where I went to an administrators conference, and it was all these heads of school. And we're talking about like really nice, like I'm talking about tuition at some of these schools are like $30,000 a year kind of deal. So that these heads of school are making anywhere close to like $200K, maybe quarter. I mean, it depends on the elite school, and some of them sell on eBay, and it's like that's crazy. Like, why? And some of it is because they enjoy it; it's just fun, and some of it is because they truly need that side money, right? Maybe that side money. This is one thing you got to understand. A lot of people have to understand, and we haven't talked about it a lot, is that you may make a certain amount of money a year, but you could still be poor, right? You could still be paycheck to paycheck because of your lifestyle. I would say if you're like in the Bay Area or in San Diego, you can make six figures and still be living paycheck to paycheck. 1,000% that is true.
Even living frugally, not just like blowing your money. Yep.
Yes, correct. I mean, I can tell you that these last 2 years, there's been many months that I was paycheck to paycheck, even though I make a decent amount of reselling, just because everything's super expensive. My rent's expensive, my groceries are expensive, my gas is expensive, all these different things. And so, it is unfortunate that this is kind of where we're at. And I wonder if the numbers showed, because the economy really started, getting really bad, like 2021 and so on, even though it's funny because there's always highly debated, right? Like all these numbers and getting, but when you look at it, how much things cost, there's no argument to be made that things are cheaper now. They are way more expensive than they were a few years ago, which hurts your pocketbook. And yes, that side money definitely helps you, whether it's buying your groceries, paying your bills, all these different things. And yes, I do. I know a lot of attorneys that actually do sell on eBay. It's just interesting because, when you think of lawyer money and you think of eBay money, they could be the same depending on what you source, right? $300 an hour, right? If you source something that sells for good money, but chances of that always happening aren't very high. But I guess it's the same thing, right? Do you get a case all the time unless you're part of some high-powered firm? So I'm glad you brought that up because we're in interesting times when it comes to that. All right, now, before we get into reseller topics, one of the things we want to say is, hey, thank you to every one of you that continues to support us on Patreon. If you haven't checked out our Discord yet, the way to check out our Discord is you go to patreon.com, sign up to help us out with the podcast for $5.55 a month. That's only $5.55 a month. That's a deal. That's a deal. You can't even get a meal at most places for $5.55 a month, which is kind of wild to me. And so check us out on there, patreon.com/PureHustlePodcast. Go to the link below. And then you'll have access to our Discord that has a plethora of all kinds of different resellers, from Amazon arbitrage to eBay arbitrage to vintage sellers to private label to all these different sellers that are in the Pure Hustle community. As always, we are Pure Hustle Podcast on all social media, except we are Pure Hustle Cast on X. And then you can always give us a call, 619-738-1170. That's 619-738-1170. Shoot us an email, purehustlepodcast@gmail.com. And if you're listening to the podcast and you've never jumped over to YouTube, come on over to YouTube, hit that subscribe button, smash that like button, and click on that bell notification. And last of all, thank you to all of you that leave us reviews on iTunes. By the way, we're back at 4.9. So my goal is for us to be back at 5.0 on our Apple iTunes. And then somebody mentioned that they're the only Amazon review. I didn't know Amazon could do reviews. So if you haven't, dropped it, well, no one has except for that one person. Drop us some reviews on Amazon because maybe people are finding us through Amazon Music. So, but most importantly is the iTunes. Most people listen to us via iTunes. So if you haven't yet, gone over, drop us a 5 stars. Tell people why you listen to Pure's Podcast. It would be greatly appreciated. All right, you ready to talk about some reseller topics here?
Let's do it. eBay has a new send offer screen on their desktop. Walmart is now looking to compete with eBay, and softer growth in Q4, but still growth. All of this and more on Reseller News. Orlando, take it away.
Now, Mike, have you seen the new send offer on the desktop? Or you're not on the desktop too much.
I pretty much only use the desktop now for listing. So I do most of my offers and stuff on my phone. So explain it to me. What is this like?
I really like it. I think most people have seen this, or maybe it's being beta tested right now. I don't know. But it's basically a send offer screen that pops up when you do send the offer. And you can choose offer amount, percentage amount, or discount percentage, right? So you could send the buyer an offer, right? You could send them a percentage off. You can send them an amount off, like a dollar amount off. And it's all on one page. And on that page, it also has the ability to automatically send this offer over and over again so somebody buys. And I was like, wow, this is one of the first times in a long time I can remember eBay fixed something and they did it right, in the sense that, well, they do a lot. I'm being super judgmental, but one last one I can remember that I was like, wow, this is actually really good because it's all on that one screen, right? And there's no jumping hoops. There's no craziness. You can do things the way you want. And I really liked it. Now, my encouragement, if eBay is listening, is do the same thing on the app. Because on the app, you still got to go to multiple screens. If you want to do automatic send offers, you have to go to another screen. If you want to put a message, you have to go to another screen. It would be nice if it was just on one screen on the app and you could just take care of it, because you're going, oh, Orlando, you're just talking about a couple seconds or 3 seconds. Well, yeah, but if you're sending, 50 of these send offers a day, right? 50 times 3 seconds, that's in one day, and then do that over 7 days, and then do that over 30 days, and do that over 365 days, and do that over 10 years. I mean, the time adds up. And, sellers, in the end, they want to be fast about this. And sometimes, you want to send an offer, but you're in the middle of something. It'd be nice if it was all just on one screen. So I liked it. I don't know. Let us know in the comments if you've seen this, if you think there's anything else I should change on it. But I thought it was really well put together. So nice work, eBay. Now, I had mentioned before about, Amazon, right? And how Walmart was trying to compete with Amazon. And Walmart is actually doing even more to compete. But now they're doing it to compete with eBay, which I think is kind of interesting. And so a few things that Walmart is doing, and maybe Walmart is something we should start looking at. I know we had mentioned for 3 years. I never really looked at Walmart Plus. I know a lot of people that do Amazon primarily looked at Walmart Plus. Some of our listeners who are big time Amazon sellers went to Walmart Plus. But right now I'm looking at, so I'm reading a story. This comes from, I don't know, this news site is Finamize, and they say Walmart is stepping up its game to compete with e-commerce giant Amazon, by introducing a new slew of services for its marketplace sellers. The retail behemoth is now handling the transportation of goods from Asia to U.S. warehouses, fulfilling orders and managing returns from any e-commerce website. Additionally, it's offering cash advances to qualified sellers and waiving peak season storage fees for inventory sent to its fulfillment centers before September 30th. That means no warehouse fees, which is really, really nice. This initiative, unveiled at Walmart's annual Marketplace Seller Summit, aims to help sellers gear up for the holiday season, which coincides with Amazon's Prime Day. And then on top of that, there was another news story that Walmart is actually getting more into the secondary goods market. So they're doing more with collectibles. They're doing more with, a lot of secondary electronics. It's actually called Resold. I'm looking it up right now. Resold on Walmart. And I'm like, okay, is this going to be the place that eventually becomes a highly competitive market for eBay? I look at it right now. It's not. I mean, if you're listening to podcasts, you can just Google Resold Walmart, and there's a pre-owned section. So there's like pre-owned golf clubs, there's pre-owned electronics. But
I mean, they do have good ads. I mean, I'll put it this way: like, there's a lot of times where I look to buy something, and it shows up, on Google, and it's like Walmart, and so I'm like, oh, sweet, Walmart has this, and I click on it, and yeah, it's a used item, or not necessarily used, but an item being sold by a third party through Walmart. So, I mean, there's definitely, they do push pretty well. Their SEO is pretty well optimized. I feel like I find things more often that I'm looking for coming up from a Walmart option to buy than I do eBay.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? It's just wild. And probably, I would say, that's because eBay has gotten out of doing more promotions on Google, like as a whole, because they've put the onus on sellers to do it, right? That's why they now offer that, here's a $75 credit or here's a $100 credit to do offsite ads. And, at the last eBay ads event I went to, the reason they're doing that is because now they're telling sellers, hey, if you want your stuff higher in Google search, well, there's this opportunity that, we're not doing this anymore, but you can do it if you want, in which you're able to prioritize your items. Right. So I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing. I don't like why is Walmart showing up for secondary goods over eBay? Like, that's concerning. So I'm on this resold site right now, and they offer all kinds. Let me see. They have resold electronics, home, fashion. So let me click on fashion. I'm just interested. And so it's not like, I'm seeing Prada purses. I'm seeing like a lot of luxury goods. Rolex is on here. So I know eBay's trying to do their authenticity guarantee, and so I think that's still going to go a lot further for people. Like, there's no way I would buy a Rolex on resold right now. I would buy it on eBay. So to eBay's credit, I think their authenticity guarantee is a good thing. But I got to tell you, like, I find that maybe Walmart, has the kind of money and resources to be able to compete. So maybe it's something to think about. It may be something that I look to be able to sell on there too, if they ever sell the kind of stuff that I sell. I'm looking for collectibles. I'm not seeing anything like.
I think just like anything, like, right, like there's certain items that we buy that make sense to go to Amazon versus to go on eBay, or other items that make sense to go to on Depop maybe, or so I would say. I don't know if the secondary is really the market there, but in the same way you would send things to Amazon, like if you bought a VCR DVD combo still sealed in box, like that might be something you put up on Amazon because you'll get a higher rate for than necessarily eBay. That might be an instance where you would use Walmart as a reseller, not so much necessarily for secondary goods, like, or used goods, but new in box items that could go to Amazon, be sold for new on eBay, but maybe Walmart has the reach for that specific item.
Yeah, could be. I'm looking at this, and again, I'm saying, like, maybe eBay needs to get back to promoting more eBay on Google instead of having sellers do it. Now, obviously, right now they're making a ton of money off of sellers, so why would they switch that up? I guess if it's keeping them viable, but I don't know. I look at this and I do like the way eBay looks. I think eBay does a good job of, when you're looking for vintage items, like it's pretty good. It's pretty good, but not to say that Walmart in a little bit couldn't catch up to eBay real quick, and then eBay is going to lose even more market share than it already has to Whatnot and Mercari and Poshmark and all these different groups. So, all right, and then one other thing I wanted to talk about here was the idea that Q4, according to Salesforce and other retail kind of, holiday, like, I don't know, analytic companies, they're looking that Q4 is still going to be strong. Like, it's still going to present growth. So I want to encourage everyone that, Q4 is the best time, to sell things. There is no other time. Some may argue January, and that is true for some eBay sellers. But in my experience, Q4 has been incredible. Now, they do say that the growth will be expected growth of 2%, but it's like it's 0.01 or 0.02 less than expected, but it's still growth, right? They're still expecting a lot of people to buy, even though credit card usage is at the all-time highest, even though credit card maximization, where people are, all maxed out on their cards, is at its highest. Always remember, people are going to buy gifts. right? Whether it be the guilt that drives them, whether it be like, hey, I really love my kids, I really love my friends, I want to buy something for them for Christmas. Whatever it is, people will spend. And so make it your best effort to be ready for Q4. We already have had a live episode. We've had themed episodes this past summer. But do everything you can because I anticipate it's going to be a good Q4. I don't know what your thoughts on this, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, people always spend on Christmas time, and I think, I don't know, it's tough to say what's going to happen. People are going to pay for food first. Like, that's the most important. People need food. People need shelter. Like, you got the hierarchy of needs, right? So there's certain things people are not going to let go. But yeah, when we live in a system in a society where you can just get another credit card, I've known lots of people who, you know, they're already paycheck to paycheck or struggling. But yeah, they'll max out a credit card in order to ensure that their kids have a good birthday or that there's a good Christmas. Yeah. And again, those people are going to spend money anyways for those things, so it might as well be going to you to feed your family and get your kids Christmas gifts. So there's nothing we could do on our end to fix that part of the system, but we can definitely, you know, use it in order to help pay our bills and to make ends meet for us. You almost just wonder though, with when is it going to get to a point where like there's the credit cards stop? Like that's when it's going to get real rough for everybody. You know, I just the Fight Club situation comes to mind. Like, is there going to have to be like it's all forgiven, like a year of Jubilee, right? Like, I mean, it would be, but can you also imagine the side effects of that, right? Like, there's a lot of things where there's secondary, like, or there's that would cause so many other things to happen. Yeah. And so, yeah, on paper, you might like, yeah, that looks great. But yeah, if all of a sudden things were forgiven, like, okay, what does that mean to people who are working for those? I mean, who knows what could happen? But for as long as we can control what we can control, get those items listed. I imagine people are going to buy, right? Like, you're still going to sell items Q4. I think it's probably going to be less, but again, as the secondary market, maybe that is actually where we pick up a little bit. Maybe people are like, hey, I'm not going to necessarily buy the new Lego set for my kid, but they do want this video game, and here's one used on eBay. I'm going to get that for them, right? Because I'm going to be able to get it for $25 or $30 on eBay. It's $60 new. The Lego set they want $75. I want them to have a good Christmas. I might as well go with the used video game, right? So for those of us who are in that secondary market, there's I definitely think a potential for a season when things are rough where people will be looking to secondary.
Yeah, I'm telling you, people will buy. I'll give you my personal story. You know, when I was a dumb 23-year-old, I remember my daughter was going to turn 2, and we were broke. Like, we didn't have our own car, furniture, all this stuff. And I had credit cards I had to pay. And I chose not to pay by credit cards in December to get my daughter gifts, not knowing the disastrous effects it would have on my credit for missing payments 1 month. I didn't pay 3 credit cards. And instead I used that money. And I think I bought my daughter, that was my first kid. And I think we bought her like 20 gifts. It was stupid. It was dumb. Don't do this. But guess what? That, to me, that's a testimony of that people are willing to buy. I had another season of life where my son really wanted a video game console, and I didn't have the money for it. And guess what? I applied for a credit card just to be able to buy that console, right? And guess what? That console became a paperweight. Like, my kid never used it. But I wanted to make sure they knew that I cared about them, I loved them. And so I opened up that credit card. And guess what? If I'm doing this, I'm sure I'm not alone, and there are millions of people who are doing this, and it's just the way things are set up, and so not saying, we're being exploitive as resellers. It's just the reality of things. Like, make sure you have items up because people are going to buy during Q4 regardless of how things are. So and one last thing here, just to read from the report, it says, 47% of surveyed shoppers saying they are buying the same amount as last year, 40% buying less. Salesforce expects 2024 holiday sales growth to be softer than 23 when global sales increased 3% year over year. It reached 1.17 trillion, with U.S. online sales rising 1% year over year to 272 billion. So a reminder again, just because it's going to be softer, it doesn't mean it's not growing. It's just not growing at the level that people were expecting. So keep an eye there. All right, so that's all I got for reseller topics. What do you got for your? We got to do some bolos here. Bolo. What's your bolo?
All right, so my bolo is we've talked a lot in the past about like vintage clothing, as far as like vintage band shirts, vintage game, merchandise. But there's actually, I feel like, and what is vintage? 20 years, right? So maybe that's a level, but I think if you just shorten that time frame a little bit and broaden your scope. So instead of just thinking like vintage band shirts, because I think those become almost collectible. But my wife and I were talking, because we've recently had quite a few clothing sales, things like Banana Republic stuff or Hudson jeans, those types of things that we're starting to see more and more selling. What we think potentially is happening is when people bought those clothes, they weren't necessarily buying collectible vintage type clothes, but they bought a nice pair of jeans, or they bought, a decent sweater, and they've had that sweater for 5-10 years. And then all of a sudden, it's got a stain on it. It's starting to rip. It doesn't fit anymore, but I really like this cut. But now when they go to Banana Republic to try and buy the sweaters that they used to get for much cheaper, it's like, holy cow, prices have really shot up. Things cost way more than they used to cost. And in addition to that, like, I have less money to spend because things are really rough right now. So people are turning to eBay to get, I feel like, older, middle of the road clothing, right? Like the things that were like mall brands from 10 years ago, a little bit higher quality, but also people knew them, right? Like, I knew this sweater. I like this sweater. I like this fit of these jeans, or whatever the type of clothing is. So I think you can kind of broaden your scope from just like vintage, old school, Nintendo shirts or Metallica shirts, and just be looking at the mall brands. Because mall brands today, I mean, what's it called now? Fast fashion, right? Where like people are buying things. Like you go into you go to H&M and you buy, a dress shirt at H&M. You're pretty sure you're going to be able to wear that for a few weeks. Like a handful of times it goes through the wash, and then it's probably not going to hold up much longer than that. And so that stuff just doesn't last. So yeah, it's fine if you're like a high school kid going to homecoming and you're just wanting a button-up shirt and you don't own one and you're never going to wear it again. But people who are buying clothes more readily than that, like they're more and wearing them more often. Where they used to go to JCPenney's, or they used to go to Macy's.
TJ Maxx? Oh, no.
Yeah, no, not the rack stores, but like if they'd go to Macy's and they'd buy, a Calvin Klein dress shirt, which, at the time was a little bit more affordable, and now it's like, wow, they're going in there paying $80 for a dress shirt, which used to only be like $20 for sale at Macy's. Those brands, I feel like there is an uptick. I'm not saying that it's so big that you should go out and buy every single old Macy's brand stuff, but I am seeing a slight uptick in those sales, because I think, again, as people are realizing, hey, this doesn't fit anymore, but I can't replace it as cheap as I bought it for, even, I'm going to have to get it used. And I think that those items are worth taking a second look at and researching and potentially picking up.
It's interesting. I do think there's truth to that, in the sense that, for example, I don't know if I want to give this example, but so I love black T-shirts, right? But there's a certain kind of T-shirt that makes, bigger folks like me look like a sack of potatoes, or it gives a better outline, right? And so, like the old school Hanes heavyweight T-shirts, right? Because they're heavier and they're thicker material. They don't make them anymore. But if you buy those shirts, like you can only buy them like on eBay. You can buy them used, and I'm willing to pay. I'm not going to pay 30, 40, 50 bucks for one, but am I willing to pay like maybe 12, 15, 20 bucks for one? Yeah. Right. And maybe you get them for cheap. I'm not saying that's a bolo. That is not a bolo, but I understand, like, it's middle of the road. It's not like a Grail T-shirt. It's not like something special, but I myself, like, I look at old brands that I used to wear and their quality, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna pick that up, because I am a creature of habit. Like, if you look at pictures of me over the last decade, I wear pretty much the same thing, and I just buy it new, but it's the same brand, same style, same whatever. And so, I think you make a good point there. I think that's a good point. All right, so my vintage bolo is computer electronics, and this could mean a whole wide range of things, but I'm finding that they are going up in value. Certain keyboards. Whether it be a compact Presario, whether it be a Fujitsu, whether, you still have the Microsoft ergonomic keyboard. You have the old optical mouses, the trackballs. Obviously you have, the Apple stuff and all that. But keep an eye out, whether it be, maybe even like old manuals, like vintage electronics. I think maybe the market's going down. I don't know when I caught the market, but I've been buying some of this stuff for the last year, and it's gone really well for me. So obviously do your due diligence, do your research, but keep an eye out for vintage computer electronics. All right, Mike. So what are you looking forward to here?
The weather, I feel like, is starting to cool down. Like it's not like fall time out there in San Diego here or anything. But we're not well over 100 degrees. In fact, this was a pretty mild summer. But I think that I'm probably starting to move into, as we get into September and October, actually hitting garage sale season out here. So I'm looking forward to that because, I mean, there's just nothing like it. You can go to thrift stores, you can go to bins, you can go to a Amazon return store, you can go to swap meets, but nothing beats the haggling, nothing beats just the finds you can have when you go to garage sales. And so I've gotten my toes wet this year at some garage sales here. I found the good areas. I feel like I know the fishing holes now. Now I'm just ready for there to be more than like one or two in a 5 to 10 mile radius. So I'm looking forward to that. What about you?
I'm kind of the same. The weather's cooled down finally. I know it's so different than yours, but here, it gets 87 degrees and people are like, oh man, it's too hot out there. And it's dry heat too. That's what's funny about it. But, there hasn't been really, I don't think there's been a garage sale like season. And usually, again, in September, October, they do rebound here in San Diego. I want to have a fill the car moment again. I haven't had one of those since I was looking at all the footage I've had. I haven't had one of those since probably last August. So it's been a year since I've had that. So I'm looking forward to that happening here soon. I'm also, I'm a kind of, I think it's time for me to dip my toes into Amazon again. I recently sourced some stuff on Amazon and it sold. And I'm like, all right, I think I want to go at it again. I got burned a couple years ago. I bought I've mentioned this before, I think like 30K of inventory. And it was a complete fail. So I had like a $30,000 loss. And I'll be wiser this time about it. And by the way, that loss wasn't just the inventory. It was the hours spent sourcing. It was the mileage, the renting of the van, all that good stuff. So we're talking about $50,000 loss. Pretty bad. And so I kind of stepped away from Amazon for a little bit. But I think I want to get back into it to Q4. I do miss the good old days where I could, I'd swipe down on my phone and it'd go from 5 to sales to 35 sales like within an hour, and the uptick and how much money I was making. I kind of miss that. So I'm going to start sourcing because now is the time to start sourcing for Amazon. I'm going to see if there's any hot bolos. And I know I'm competing with a lot. I'm competing with cook groups. And so I'm going to go to places that you cannot find out their inventory unless you are physically in the store. And so there's not that many places, but that's just a tip for people out there that aren't part of a cook group. If you're trying to find these things, if you're looking at a store that has an online presence, you're just not going to find it because all the bots already found those items. You got to find somewhere else. So looking forward to that, seeing what happens. And just looking forward to eBay maybe making a full rebound for me here pretty soon. All right, hey, everybody, thank you for joining us. Hopefully, you found this either entertaining, maybe as background noise, or you picked up some tips along the way. And appreciate every single one of you. Make sure to hit that like button as we end this podcast. And with that being said, make sure to be real,
be relevant,
and be reselling. Peace.